So grateful to be here and very happy to discuss these incredibly important and hard to talk about topics. He has an incredible backbone and staggering moral fiber. Howie is totally committed, completely ethical, totally admirable. No pressure if you can hear this, but honestly, Howie's a hero to me.
John, you joined us before, and it was a pretty incredible kind of testimony you gave, and you just devoted your life to advocacy for child trafficking, and even 9/11 truth. Maybe you could explain to us, in the last decade, what do you think the most challenging parts of coming alive on some of these issues have been?
Probably the hardest thing, and it continues, is just realizing that pretty much everything that I was told and taught since I was in grade school is probably not true. And you can take the probably out of that sentence. So. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Traffic Report. We've just been sitting here talking for about 5 minutes. So the point is we're all here now, and we have a very special guest this evening. And Howie's been on the road traveling, and I just want to right off the bat welcome Missy. She will be telling her story tonight, and I'm honored to have her, and kind of awed by her, not kind of, awed by her knowledge of a variety of topics that affect the big picture of the culture of pedophilia, child trafficking, you name it. I mean, I talked with Missy for about an hour the other day, and it was like going to a university for a lecture. So no pressure at all, Missy, but welcome, and welcome, Howie.
Thank you.
I'm glad I made it.
Me too. Missy, you were saying you wanted to ask Howie about his day before we got started.
Yeah, I saw your Periscope. Yeah, it looks like you had some fun this afternoon.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on that. I mean, it's first go. I want to apologize to people because, it's kind of difficult when you're out there and there's stuff going on, and I'm like I'm off to the light. So I'll start a Periscope and someone will start talking to me, and I'll just put the phone down, and I don't have the selfie stick. So it's just, I did that probably 4 times today, and I thought oh wait, I was periscoping and whatever. If I meet somebody on.
But who were you doing? Why were you doing this? And who was there for that you were welcoming to New York? Hillary was kicking off her book with a book signing at the Barnes and Noble in Union Square. So I felt like I should go up and at least make my presence felt. And I got to be honest with you. The people that were waiting in line, obviously I'm vehemently disagree with them being there and be baffled why they are there. But it was a pretty it was a pretty calm kind of day, and there wasn't a lot of animosity really on either side. So they did their thing, we did our thing. Some other people were there, and it was normal. The New York City police were awesome. The only problem I had the entire day was before
before Hillary, I got there about 9:30, and Hillary wasn't supposed to be there till I think 11, but she didn't show up till almost noon. And I had free reign. Like I could walk next to the crowd. I mean, it's just a kind of a smaller city street. So, and other, there's foot traffic everywhere. So, I was trying not to get in people's way, but I could walk along the street, hold my sign, and they were actually bringing her in through the back. So, we were all waiting out back till she would get there. And then as soon as it became apparent that she was coming, they pushed people back, and the Secret Service didn't like my presence there with my mask and my sign, and they told me that I had to and because agitating the people in line or something. And it wasn't the New York City police. It was it was coming down from the Secret Service. And apparently, I've seen this one other time in Philadelphia, that when the Secret Service say something, like everyone just jumps.
Right.
And they take absolute precedent. And I did get it on Periscope, but they send the police out to do their dirty work. I'm like, I can't stand here. I'm not allowed to stand here with a mask and a sign now. That's Secret Service doesn't want it. And the Secret Service presence, because I ended up going inside Barnes & Noble. I mean, I saw probably 20 of them. That's how many I saw. Probably.
Yeah. Well.
And you know what my first thought is? I really wish that there had been that much security in Benghazi.
Yeah.
I mean that sincerely. I mean,
What difference does it make? What difference does it make? They're dead.
Yeah.
It's just.
And that was the plan. So
it's like we were talking about earlier. We were saying that there's just no value to human life.
No. And that's why I'm so glad, and we're going to let you get started here, Missy, because you have, and you're going to be back on Thursday too. But the information that you have, not to mention your story and the other information, there's just no way we're going to cover this in 2 hours. And that's what it's about. It's about the culture of devaluation that's been placed on our children. I see your story as about that, and I see it as just a way that we need to look at our culture and where we're at and why these things are allowed to occur. And it's like a perfect illustration when you ask what's wrong, and we run across that all the time. Why is this going on? How did we get here? And the social engineering and every other aspect of it, I think, is really contained in your story, and you're just well versed on that. So what I'm going to do is shut the hell up and let you get on with your story.
Well, as we discussed before, like you said when we talked last week, I do want to say first and foremost, I know you don't like the word trafficked, but I want to make it abundantly clear that I was not trafficked. I was kidnapped, interstate kidnapping. I was raped. I was molested. Certainly went through lots of trauma within my home, but I was not trafficked. So I want to make that clear that I'm not trying to jump on this bandwagon of, I'm a trafficking victim or whatever.
And that's why I hate that word so much, because this problem is not just the networks. It's not just, and they're horrible problems, but it's the culture that allows to happen to you what happened, to allow that young people that have been raped, child rape. Lori Handrahan is bringing that out and trying to change the culture to have that represent what's going on, because it is. And I mean,
right.
So yeah, and we understand that, and your story is in my mind an integral part of this whole big picture, and it's no less important than a story or somebody who was in one of the networks. because every individual survivor and anybody that's affected by this, whether it's being raped or tortured as you were,
Yeah, absolutely. We don't. I mean, I don't think there's any type of scale where whether you were trafficked or whether you were sexually abused. I mean, the name of the show, the Traffic Report, it's just because it was more of a catchy title. It's the child sex abuse show just didn't have much weight to it. But it's all no matter what happened to a child, and even if it's we don't really touch on it very often, whether it's verbal, emotional, physical abuse, it's all on the same lines.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I just want to make it clear that I'm not accusing the person who abused me of trafficking me, I guess is what I wouldn't want to put out any information and in any way have it be misconstrued to be something it's not. So, whatever that looks like, I guess I just,
you made yourself perfectly clear, and that is perfectly clear. We just want to make sure that that your story, especially, I mean, this is a big umbrella, the way I look at it. Anybody that's interested in children's rights and everybody needs to be under that umbrella, regardless of the circumstance of whatever happened to them, and that's and you get that too. So it's very abundantly clear. So I guess I better shut up again.
Well, no, not at all. I guess I could just start by, just going chronologically. That's probably the easiest for me. And I'll try to be brief, like you said, that, we have an hour tonight and maybe an hour on Thursday. And there is so much that I don't know that I'll be able to cover it all. But and I have a tendency to go off on a tangent. So if, squirrel, if I see something, start talking about something, keep me on track here. So
we specialize in tangents. So you're in the right.
When I was 5 years old, my mom and my dad got divorced. I'm the youngest of 3 children, and they'd been married for 16 years. There was lots of problems in their marriage, both sides, nobody's perfect, all that kind of stuff. So my mom, I was 5 when they got divorced, and I was 7 when she remarried. The person that she remarried was younger than she was, and he didn't have any children. He'd never been married before. He was younger than she was by about 8 years, but he made a lot of money. He was an aerospace engineer, and one of the things I didn't cover with you, John, the other night that I meant to mention was that in the beginning, when they first got married, he owned his own business. And whether this is true or not, I don't know for sure, but he told my mom that he was doing top secret work for the government and through some very well-known aerospace companies. If I were to say their name, you'd know exactly who they were. So he had lots of money. He had an airplane hangar. He was in circles of people who were very smart and also very engineer-like. And I guess I'm just meaning that in a way that this kind of cold, kind of dry, kind of scientifically natured people. I don't know how else to describe it, and I'm not trying to paint this broad brush.
Cold. Cold is a great word. I mean, that pretty much.
Yeah.
Cold, emotionless. Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't have any friends. I mean, he had maybe 1 or 2 people that he considered his peers at work, but he didn't have like social interactions with people. He didn't go to parties. He didn't go to barbecues. We didn't have holidays. We did not vacation. I did not have birthday parties. That was just like the overall general mood of who he was. But
just to jump in real quick, you're saying you seemed like a bit of a loner. How did your mom meet him?
I believe that she met him at a skating rink. I don't know that to be for sure, but
Okay. Like a
and
roller
this is
skating?
what's that?
Like a roller skating rink, or?
Yes, this was in the 80s. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this is what people don't understand sometimes about psychopaths. They morph into and become who you want them to be. So it is just a projection of what they think you want to see. And when they start to reveal this character that they create in their mind, you fall in love with that character. That's not who they are. It's just the image they portray. And you fall in love with the image, only you don't know that that image is quite detached from the actual person. So I don't know exactly how long they dated before they were married. It wouldn't have been a whole long time because she was divorced when I was 5 and was already saying I do when I was 7. So however long it takes to plan a wedding, however long it takes to be engaged and all of those things, I don't know. We lived with him prior to their actual wedding. We moved into his condo. And that was when I was 7. And I didn't like him right away. Something was wrong. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I was 7 years old. But at their wedding, before they cut into their cake, I took a handful of the bottom layer of the cake and I smashed it in his face. I mean, they have pictures of it in the wedding album. And I know.
And children know. Children know. They have a. They're very intuitive. So yeah, absolutely.
And he, I mean, that could be really viewed from an outside sense as a very bratty, spoiled child kind of behavior. And that was his angle. Everything that I did was a spoiled child and didn't get her way. And from day one, his argument was that the only reason I was acting out was because I was angry about my parents' divorce and that I wanted them to get back together. And while that may have been true to some degree, I also knew that they wouldn't get back together. So it was like he was using that straw man argument, and it worked. It worked.
Yeah, and these types of people, these victimizers, I mean, they have radar. I mean, they can spot vulnerable people, and they definitely zero in on children, and they zero in on single parents, and I mean, they're predators. So.
Right. They are, and they are very systematic in the way that they operate, and it's so sadistic and so malignant that to where what I mean is it's fixed. It's a personality that is not going to be changed and cannot be corrected. No. They do anything and everything to cover that up so that you can't find out who that real person is. I mean, most people think that psychopaths are like the creepy guy in the trench coat on the corner, in the alley or whatever. That's not true. It's not true. I mean,
and people like yourself, Missy, and V, and also Becky, are breaking down those stereotypes, and showing everybody, and that's what people need to realize, and to break through this stupor that they're in. That, I mean, like Becky's parents, they were just like, well, normal parents. They were trafficking their kid, but they appear like normal, and that's why this story is so important. They need to know that the engineer guy who works in the black the black budget programs and looks to everybody like he's outstanding, member of society, doesn't mean he's not a monster.
Yeah. And that was how he got away with it. I mean, okay, so let me start with the first thing that I remember that he did that was off the charts unacceptable was he had bought himself a 1985 silver Mercedes 550 SL convertible. And he called it, well, I don't want to say what he called it because that was on the license plate. Anyway, that was his baby. He loved that car. Well, those are only 2-seaters. And I was a small child, but he thought it would be funny to put me in the trunk of a car. And so he pulled over on the side of the road and said, "Get in the trunk." And okay, that's funny. All right, let's go. Yeah, no, seriously, get in the trunk. He wasn't kidding. And I thought, okay, he'll put me in there and then he'll let me out, right? Right? Hey guys, joke's over. No.
And just and you told me that the other day, and the terror. I mean that just brought up in me for that child is just he needed to be shot right there. I mean, but go ahead. I'm sorry. That's just my personal opinion.
Did your mom find out about that?
My mom was in the car.
Where were you sitting?
I was in behind the 2 seats. It was like a
yeah, I know, a little space. I know.
Yeah,
it's like
it's like a hump. It's not even a seat. It's like a little hump that goes over the trunk area.
Gotcha.
And so.
And your mom was cool with that?
I think my mom thought the same thing that I thought. Like, okay, this is a joke, right? Like, okay, ha ha ha, it's not funny anymore. And
Right.
He got in the car and he drove on down the road. Now, I have no idea how far he drove. I have no idea how long. I mean, I have no reference of time or distance. And I still to this day don't remember what my mom was doing. Like, was she freaking out? Was she silent? I don't remember. That was like the first thing that I remember of something's really, really wrong here.
Yeah.
And he thought it was hilarious. He thought it was so funny. And that's the kind of thing that the sadistic nature of the way that they behave, what they find entertaining, and what they find that satisfies them is completely different.
Perverse.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally perverse. And let me say too that and we ask questions like that, but how did your mom react? This guy was obviously with her for a while, and that's what they do. Once he met her, he knew she had a young child, and he knew her boundaries, and so he knew before he did that she may not react very well to it, but that he already had her before any of that happened, and knew pretty much what he could do and what he could get away with, because that's how the predators work. So, anyway.
And I think he was testing her also to see how far he could push it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so there was, at that time, that was in the mid 80s. Nobody had caller ID or GPS or anything like that. And the story that I hear, these days is that my real dad, was calling on the phone a lot, harassing my mom. And so, unbeknownst to me, they had been making arrangements for a year or two to find locations in another state. And they told me we were going to go on a road trip to see some of my mom's family. And we did that. We drove around. We were traveling for, a week or two. And the next thing I know, I'm in another state and I'm being enrolled in school. Now, I wasn't told that we were moving. My real dad wasn't told we were moving. My two brothers that lived with my dad weren't told we were moving. My dad showed up to our house to pick me up for my weekend visitation to an empty house and a for sale sign.
Wow.
And like I said, this is before caller ID or GPS, or he had no idea where we were. And
No.
I was
told.
Go ahead.
Obviously, you're being victimized by both parents by this time. You know, I mean, who does that? Who tells their 7-year-old, "Oh, we're going for a ride," and kidnaps them from a custodial, you know, or I'm sure your dad had visitation rights.
Yeah.
Just kidnaps them. So you've got an abuser, and you've got your mom probably another victim of the abuser. You know.
Right. She was a victim in her own way, and she was also a victim of these sorts of things as a child too. So this is generational, and it's like you were saying about boundaries. When we're not taught proper ways of interacting with people in healthy relationships, and taught that we can say no, when we're not taught that, this is how we end up in adult relationships. And it's a process of learning that you're worthy to say no. But and so he was convincing her in his own way of all of the things that he wanted to have happen. And just like we see in these institutions today that try to like rationalize this craziness, and they get us to try to believe that this is best. We just love these children. It's what's best for them. That's not true.
Yeah, and we talked about this, but talk about this too, Missy. Because we were talking about this, and seems like what was going on there. Not only, okay, so the guy is physically torturing you, puts you in a trunk, he's kidnapped you out of state. And while all this is going on, I mean, he is working on you to everything you say or do, let's talk a little bit about that. He's brainwashing you.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
grooming you for abuse.
I want to touch on really quickly the child rape issue. And then we'll get to, if we have time, hopefully get to some of this other stuff. As I got older, from the time I was 9 when we got to the other state where we lived. And so from 9 until about 12, I was getting older, and I was starting to realize that the things he was saying to people, like my teachers and my counselors, was not true. He was telling people things that I was crazy, that, all these, that I was making things up. I was trying to report to my teachers and to my counselors that something was wrong. But at that point, I was too young to communicate well. And at that point, also, the abuse wasn't as bad. It wasn't until I got older and started saying no. That's when it really ramped up. But I was sent to my biological dad for the summer when I was 12. And I made a fateful decision that day to hang out with people that I didn't know. And
okay, before you and you're going there, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you were locked out of that house, were you not?
That hadn't happened yet.
Sorry. Okay, all right, my bad.
So, I guess without going into too much detail, I was in a situation at 12 years old that I should not have been in, and someone who I didn't know, who was 19 years old at the time, I found out later, took advantage of a situation of me being very vulnerable, and I was raped at 12 years old. There were a number of people in the room when it happened. And I lived with, like I said, I lived with my biological dad at that time. And he was very upset about what happened. And I was very ashamed. And he took me to the doctor immediately. And he wanted them to do, you know, all kinds of tests on me, make sure he didn't have any, you know, diseases or anything like that. This was like the day after it happened. And the nurse said to me, you know, this is date rape. And I'd never heard that term before. That was when that term was very new. I mean, I wasn't on the date with the guy. I didn't even know the guy.
Yeah.
I didn't know his name. I didn't know his name for months afterward.
Yeah. A 19-year-old rapes a 12-year-old, and it's date rape. I mean, and you told me that, and in my head nearly blew up when you told me that. I mean,
yeah. And, you know, like I said, this was in, would have been late 80s, early 90s. I think culture, society, whatever, that kind of thing was becoming more known out, you know, in just.
You know, and Missy, I just got to stop you there too, because even in the 80s, for God's sake, a rape of a child was a felony and a, you know, an offense that would have sent somebody to jail for a long time. And what's so shocking to me is that medical professionals, you know, are trying to, and that's what we see. You know, you have this culture around it that instead of protect the child and call this what it is, you know, they're minimizing it and calling it date rape. I mean,
yeah, there weren't any police involved or anything like that. I mean, it was a full-on, you know, medical.
Missy, can I jump in for a second? Because, I mean, I know you and John talked. I wasn't in on the conversation. Is there a reason why you don't want to, you sort of danced around, you know, I was in a situation that I shouldn't have been in. Do you not want to talk about that situation, or?
I can. Yeah, I was.
Well, yeah. I mean, everyone right now is because when I was 19, I was, you know, there were no 12-year-olds around. So I guess, and to, you know, make people understand how this, you know, how this happens, like what was the exact situation?
I was in middle school, and I made a choice to hang out with some girls from my school that I didn't know well. I knew of them because they were in my class. They had older boyfriends, and their older boyfriends had friends, and we left school that day and were drinking. And I'd never drank before, and I became intoxicated. And that's what I meant. I mean, I made a decision.
And you know, at 12 years old, that is not an uncommon decision. I mean, I did the same thing. I ended up wrecking a motorcycle, but you know, I mean, that's not. I mean, that's what kids do at that age. You know, it's not. You know, what kind of.
So at the time, you leaving school with your friends, and all this happens, and nothing was done about this?
No, not. What happened was
right. That right there. I mean, I don't know if you know if this 19-year-old was the son of somebody important or whatever, but there's obviously something going on there that police, hospital, school would all just look away as though. And that just goes to show that they don't really, you know, we see it time and time again how they don't care.
Yeah. I mean, it was swept under the rug is basically what happened.
Yeah. And I've also heard, you know, similar type. Oh, we don't want to ruin his college career and all this other bullshit. So, you know, yeah, that's the culture, you know, that we're talking about here. That's what's so ridiculous that, you know, and yeah, it was worse, you know, back in the 80s, but it's incredible to me that even at that time, that this wasn't a prosecuted case, for God's sake. I mean, if I was your dad, I mean, I'd be in jail now. I'd still be in jail, you know. But wow.
Yeah. And so after that happened, this person found out that I had told my dad, and there were some threats made, and my mom got scared, and my mom came and put me on a plane and got me out of there within a number of days. So
this was from time you were spending with your biological father.
Right.
This happened. Okay.
Right. So then once I got back living with my mom, this was within a week or two after that incident took place. And, you know, I got the talking to when I got home about making wise choices and not putting myself in, you know, compromising positions and all this other stuff. And then that was it. And like no counseling, none of that kind of thing. And after that, I didn't care anymore. I mean, I really didn't. I didn't care about anything. And the situation with my parents went downhill very quickly. 12 years old was the year that my stepdad got angry and ripped my bedroom door off the hinges, and told me that I didn't deserve privacy, and that I didn't deserve to have a bedroom door, and that I lived in his house, and that it was his bedroom, and he allowed me to stay there. And if he chose not to allow me, then he would choose not to allow me to live there. And he was screaming at me, and he had his nose pressed up against my nose and had me literally in the corner, and my head was hitting the back of the wall as he was, you know, trying to make his point by hitting me in the face with his nose.
That's called assault, by the way.
And this went on for a number of hours. My mom my mom was physically trying to pull him off of me, and he was kind of just shrugging her off. And at one point I ducked out from under his arm, and I went in the kitchen and I grabbed a steak knife, and I told him, get away from me. If you don't get away from me, if you don't leave me alone, I'll stab you. And he said, give me the knife. And I said, if I do, it's going to be in your chest. Leave me alone. And after hours and hours and hours of screaming and craziness and just frantic, frenzied, like he was so upset he was spitting when he was speaking. And he turned on his heel and he went in the kitchen and he said, okay, 911, my daughter just tried to kill me. And he had me arrested for attempted murder. And the cop took me outside, and I was in the driveway, and all the neighbors could see me. And the cop said, look at that big, beautiful house you live in. Look at those parents who love you. You're such an ungrateful child, and you're so lucky to have what you have. If you only knew what I saw out there. And I thought to myself, if you only knew what I saw in there.
And I guess never dawned on the cop that a 12-year-old trying to stab her father, that, you know, there might be a problem there with what's going on in the house. But yeah, and that was really common, you know, in the 70s and 80s, that law enforcement had no fucking clue. Excuse me.
And because his go-to was that I was angry about the divorce, I wanted my parents to get back together, and now I'm depressed, and now I'm, you know, have mental health issues, and I just can't be trusted, and look, she's, you know, irrational. Look what we're dealing with. I mean, that was he played the innocent, victimized
Yeah.
step parent, and he would say that my mom and I were ganging up on him. And that was his, he was the eternal victim of me as a 12-year-old. And when he and my mom would get into an argument, because her thing with him was, if she could only like satisfy his, whatever his need was, whatever his gripe was, if she could just fix that, if she could just make him happy, then this would all get better. If I just keep trying, if I just keep working. And that's the string that they pull you by. It's the ever-changing goalpost. It's the you're just not quite there. Everything could be perfect if only you would do this. If only you would do that.
If only you hadn't gotten raped. I mean, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, if only I hadn't done, a million things. That was just one of them. And he thought that all of the things that I quote unquote did were direct, representations of disrespect towards him. He was very big about respect. You don't respect me, you will respect me. This is my house. I deserve respect. I mean, it was like this totalitarian, it was
mad
like this
dictator.
Little tiny prison.
Yeah. Yep. And you were an obvious sadist. Anybody that could put a child in a trunk of a car and then laugh about it. I mean, we know who he is, and he's obviously a sadist. And we had talked about this, a little bit too in my research. These I don't even know if there's sadist is a name for them, but they seem to be involved with young children that can be sadists to young children are in fact pedophiles that are impotent, and I'm not accusing him of that. I don't have the ability to do that, but hearing the circumstances of this and other cases that these creeps that don't function sexually end up sadistically abusing kids, whether it's putting them in trunks or beating them or mental torture. And it seems to me, since you're 7 years old, just about every day of your life, you were suffering from mental torture from the guy.
Yeah, I mean,
Missy, can we go out of order for a second, because I want to know. I mean, the thing that's just popping into my mind right now is what is your relationship with your mother right now?
The last few years have been difficult. I've had some situations in my family, my husband's family, that have been really painful for me. And there was one incident that really brought up a lot of the trauma for me, and that was not related to my childhood at all. But that couple of years ago, for a couple of 6 or 8 months, I couldn't even talk to my mom. Like I couldn't talk to her at all. I was so angry and so hurt. It was like, and that was when I finally first started looking at all of the trauma, and I stopped trying to pretend it wasn't there. It was like I finally
so you were going along pretending. So it was like this thing, it was the pink elephant in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I knew, and I just never talked about it.
Okay.
And when people, would ask about my childhood or my life, really the only thing I could say is, like, I've seen more in my life than most people see in the movies. And I didn't really know how else to say some of this stuff, because it's not.
We can touch on it later. I'm just like, I'm like, wow, like, I mean, I don't like to.
We haven't talked about it, if that's what you're asking. We have not.
And very, very common. I mean, that when you become, and I just know this because I've studied all these different cases, but when this happens to people at that young age, you shut down, you put up walls, you build up defenses. The family is definitely out of touch. So no, it would never be talked about, unless there's some, arrest, some reason where they would. That's how it is, and that's why you're telling your story is so important, because there's somebody out there listening that's been through this and that hasn't said a word to anybody, that obviously doesn't talk about it with any of their close family, and that's just status quo, and until and it seems like you were starting your recovery process, that's when a lot of this stuff comes to a head.
Yeah. And she and my stepdad are divorced now. They've been divorced almost 15 years. And that was a whole nother situation. I mean, it just, everything there is to tell about this guy is awful. But, to answer the question about how it is with my mom now, it's still very much like the elephant in the room. She knows I'm in therapy now, and I've asked her to go to therapy on her own, to kind of deal with the stuff that for her that led up to this. And I don't know if she's ready in her own way. And I can't make that happen. I can only do for me and for my children the best that I can to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future to my kids or, anybody else's kids that I
and you've already broken the cycle, Missy. You've already broken the cycle because it's obvious. And if nobody has told you this, I mean, you are a miracle. I mean, just to survive that and everything else that you've been through, to be able to move on and to have a family of your own, and that's not the common story. I mean, that is a total exception. People that are victimized like this and tortured and raped as children, a lot of them are not around to talk about it, because the cycles that they get into with addiction or many other behaviors that come out of that are these people don't survive. So
yeah.
You're a miracle. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you. I wanted to cover one other thing that happened that year that I turned 12 was when my stepdad had made a rule that if I came home late from a friend's house, that he would change the locks on the door. And I had a friend, where we lived was somewhat rural, so it wasn't like, you just walk down the street, to your friend's house, down the sidewalk. We didn't have sidewalks. It was a number of miles from my house to my friend's house. And her older sister was supposed to give me a ride home. And she didn't. She ended up leaving and going to a movie. So I didn't have a ride. I tried to call my mom. I left several messages on our answering machine, which were not answered, or which, no response or anything like that. And when I got to the house, which was about a half an hour late, I said to my friend, I have a really bad feeling, or my friend's sister, I said, I have a really bad feeling. Can you please just wait right here in the driveway for me and just make sure I get inside? And she said, yeah, why? And I said, why? He may have changed the locks. And she's like, what? I said, just wait here, And I went to the front door and I knocked on the door, and he leaned back in his lazy boy recliner and looked left towards me. He saw me there and he sat back up in his chair and ignored me. And those locks were changed. I did not have a way in. He had changed the lock to the deadbolt, and I was out for 10 days. That was when I was 12 years old. And he lied and told my mom later that I had never come home, that he'd never seen me, that I was never at the door. And I knocked on the door for a long time to try to get, like, hello, I'm standing right here, let me in. And he never did. And
Where was your mom?
I don't know. I think she was either in her bedroom in the back, or downstairs in her sewing room. I'm not sure. But
Oh, come on.
I don't
I mean,
know. I honestly
no,
don't.
I'm not saying you that you don't know. I'm just like really?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would, and she knew. Absolutely. That's what you're saying, right, Howie?
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I'm.
She knew. She knew.
I don't want.
She
Yeah,
knew.
I don't want to. I've been trying for about 10 minutes right now to not start going off on your mom, but I mean this is just. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is.
No, I understand. Trust me. I know.
No, I know, but
frustration. And all I can say is, yes, I know. I trust me. I had those, and that's where the pain and the trauma comes for me in relation to my mom, is that she knew that this was going on, because, like I said, I was out of the house for 10 days. So
yeah, I mean, personally, I mean, listening to your story, like, I'm angrier at her, like, not because she could have just stopped it.
And I don't know. She couldn't have stopped it choosing to stay.
Yeah.
And she chose to stay.
Right.
And
no, she could have stopped it choosing to stay, but just
right.
what do you like, man, it's just, but like telling the story. See, when something's in the news, these situations, they don't go into details. They'll give the basics and everything like that. And this is why these stories are so important to, like, wait, nobody would believe, but no, if a stepfather was sexually abusing his stepdaughter, or starting out, of course a mother would intervene. The mother would intervene and get the child out of there, because that's
Well, and that, but look. Go on. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm just saying, like, people have to realize, what the fuck is going on. That, I mean, your mother wasn't doing this to you, but she was enabling him to. So.
Yeah, and the always the crux of the story was that if we can just do better to make him happy, this will all go away.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
And it's but and it is classic. That is, she's been victimized, or that personality, or somewhere down the line. And this guy knew that when he married her, and it says it right there. I'll just put my mother in that situation. Had somebody tried to put in a trunk at 7 years old, she'd have killed him right there. I mean, he would have been dead. So, and I'm not comparing your mom to my mom, but any other human mother, that has a mother's instinct, allowing that to happen there, everything else is really not surprising. After that moment, it lets you know where she was at, and people that are there for whatever reason, whether it was abuse that happened to her when she was young, or whatever the reason, that just gets worse and worse and worse, yeah. and that person is truly powerless as it gets worse to do any normal, healthy action. So, and believe me, I'm not trying to excuse it either.
No, it's true. But over time, your thought processes and the complexities of all of the things that have happened as they compile, it gets harder and harder and harder to start to differentiate any of those things, and it becomes such a muddled mess that you can't see your way out.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but it's very difficult. And that's why these kinds of people are so dangerous. and why. I mean, yeah, I mean, just the and I was always told, this is the most painful part. I was always told, I know these things are difficult, but it'll get better this time. I promise. This time, it's going to be better. This time, I know you don't believe me, but this time it's going to be different.
And this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's just the repetitive.
No.
It's just, it's a betrayal.
Spirit crushing, I call it. And that son of a bitch, the sadist, child abuser, scumbag, beat on you since, whether it might not have been physically, but it was. Okay, so we've got physical abuse, torture, and the mental abuse, I've heard is worse. And I'm sure you were and you told me, I mean, this guy, everything that came out of your mouth, every action that you took was wrong. There was something wrong with you. I think you said that he said the way you thought was defective. I mean, and oh God, Missy, I mean, all I'm thinking right now is where was anybody that was looking out for the interests of that child, and that's if I could, if I had a crystal ball, I want to be that person that noticed this and took you the hell away from these people who were monsters, and that I would have to include your mom in that to regardless of how she got there, to allow that to continue to happen and to see, and she must have knew about all of it or a large percentage of it. And
yeah,
I'm sorry that some adult was not there to rescue you from two monsters. Sorry.
And see, this is the thing. I was a child who should have been removed and placed by social services, and now, knowing what I know, I'm kind of glad I wasn't taken by social services, if you catch my drift.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to say that one is worse or better than the other. That's the kind of vulnerability that these children are facing right now. And that's why these children are not getting the help that they need. And that's why these children are being victimized right now, because they are in the same type of situation where they're being repetitively abused.
And
no
murdered.
One's listening.
And murdered. And our first show and our picture, Adrian. Okay, and this is it. We're right up against.
John, we're gonna run out of time.
Missy, thank you so much. You've just scratched the surface.
And on Thursday, I want to start with the point of differentiating between psychopaths and sociopaths.
Okay, that's it. It can get tricky, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Missy. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you Thursday, part 2. Missy's story. Thank you, Howie.
Bye.
Stay on the line, everybody.